There are only two stories. Welcome back. I'm J.D. Walt. We're here in the green room and we're approaching the cross. We have reached Holy Week, Passion Week, the most significant week in the history of the world. And I want to talk about two stories today, as you would have imagined. Right? There's the story of Adam, and there's the story of Jesus. The story of Adam is a story of rejection and exile, or you could say exclusion. Adam, in effect, rejects God, and it results in becoming exiled from God's presence. Now, the story of Jesus is a completely different story than this. My colleague over at Duke University, Sam Wells, has taught me a lesson on the gospel that I've always remembered. He says in one of his books that if the gospel is about anything, it's about two things. It's about over acceptance and reincorporation. So in the face of rejection, the gospel gives over acceptance. And in the face of exile, the gospel leads us to reincorporation. It's this notion, and I see this nowhere better than in the story of what the Bible calls the prodigal son. Actually, the Bible doesn't call it that. The interpreters put the caption. Really, the caption should say the prodigal God. Prodigal, it means lavish, excessive, wasteful. And you know the story. The son takes his inheritance, goes into a far country, wastes his money on wild living, and one day decides to come back. Now, he has rejected his father. He has done the most clearly act of rejection that you could do. You could say, give me my share of the inheritance, which is effectively to say, die, you're dead. You are dead to me. Rejection. He goes, he squanders all the money. He comes to his senses one day. He says, I will arise and go to my father's house. And he heads toward home. And he's going over his speech like, okay, what am I going to say? Father, I've sinned against you and against heaven. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Just listen, I don't even have to come back into the home. If you could just let me live with the slaves, that's good enough. That's really more than I deserve. Just let me be a hired man. And so he's getting near the house, and maybe the greatest words in all of Scripture are these. Let's focus in on these. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was moved with pity. Better word, there's compassion. He ran to the boy, clasped him in his arms, and kissed him. I mean, that is the prodigal father right there. And Jesus is trying to say, this is who God is. We didn't know this about God before Jesus. Over acceptance. What does the father say? He says, the son starts his speech, Father, I've sinned against you and against heaven. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. And it's as though the father put his hand over his mouth, stops the speech, and says, quick, bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the calf we have been fattening and kill it. We will celebrate by having a feast because, get this, This son of mine was lost, and now he is found. He was dead, and he's come back to life. And they begin to celebrate. Over acceptance. You know, when he said put that robe on him, when he said put the ring on his finger, the shoes on his feet, kill the fatted calf, he's over accepting this son. And when he says this son of mine, he's reincorporating him into the family. I'm wondering, you know, how would I have responded? It makes me think of the story of Ted Haggard, this massive, heroic evangelical figure, the president of the Evangelical Association of North America, 50 million people. He led this massive church out in Colorado, New Life Church, top of the world, and the news story breaks that he had been having an illicit affair with a male prostitute. And even beyond that, buying crystal meth from the male prostitute. Just unbelievable news. And, you know, if I'm honest, I probably joined the scoffers at Ted Haggard. When I look back on it, I think here's a guy who squandered his inheritance, wasted it all on wild living, a person of good reputation, a person from a noble family, brought shame on the whole family, just like this son. And I think the Father heart of God is watching for him. And he is running toward him to embrace him and kiss him, to put a ring on his finger, to put the best robe. This is not just any robe, it's the best robe. To put sandals on his feet, to kill the fatted calf. This son of mine, lost, gone to a far country, is now found. He was dead, and he's come back to life. You know, the way that I feel about Ted Haggard, for instance, that tells you what I believe about God. It tells you that maybe I don't really know God like I thought I did. Do I know a God who, in the face of my worst possible self, over-accepts me? Do I know that God who reincorporates me? I remember when I was a kid, one time I was going to go fishing. My dad was going to take me fishing that afternoon. It was about 8. And I was so excited. When I passed by the kitchen, I saw my mom's purse. I looked inside the purse, and there I saw green paper. I walked over there and pulled a $20 bill out of that purse. Went out in the backyard, threw the money on the ground, walked away, walked back over, picked the money up. Look, I found $20. Went inside and told my folks. I mean, how do you think that went over? Exiled to my room, I was. I remember, I knew I'd done wrong. I knew the fishing trip was not going to happen. My folks came in the room. They let me know that they knew and that I knew and that this was never to happen again. And guess what? I went fishing that day. I went fishing that day. Over acceptance, reincorporation. That's our story.